Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for coming along and waiting around for this panel. Sorry it's running a wee bit late. My name is Vic Galloway. I present programmes for BBC Radio Scotland, until recently Radio 1. I do bits for Six Music, and I'm occasionally on the telly doing stuff for Tea in the Park. Currently working on a BBC Two TV documentary as well. I write a newspaper column and I work for Creative Scotland, so basically fairly busy within the Scottish music scene. Always a pleasure to be asked by Born to Be Wide and Wide Days to do something for them and host this panel. Just before we go any further, I'd like to say, massive respect and thank you to Olaf, Michael, Derek, and everyone from Wide Days for putting this on. Come on, a round of applause for them, please. About time something like this happened, I think. It was excellent fun last year, and hopefully you're enjoying yourselves today, and I'll see you out and about for the gigs tonight. Anyway, we're talking about music in films over the next hour or so. What I'm going to do is, I've introduced myself, I'm going to ask all our panellists to introduce themselves very briefly, and then we'll just start having a discussion about some of the pertinent areas which I think you guys will be interested in. After that, I'm going to throw it over to you. So if you've got any questions, store them up. Make sure that you're ready to fire them at any of our panelists in the next sort of 45 minutes or so. To be honest, I don't know that much about what we're about to talk about, so this is going to be as interesting for me, hopefully, as it is for you guys, and I will be genuinely asking these questions because I don't know anything about the answers. So it's going to be good for me as well. We've got all of our panelists except for one. Nigel McCune is able to, he's kind of lingering about, and there are representatives from the Musicians Union. Unfortunately, Nigel's not feeling 100%. Someone told me he's riding the porcelain Honda just now, so we won't go any further with that. But let's introduce our panelists and get them to tell you a little bit about themselves. First of all, on my right, it's Caroline Gorman from Rage Music. Hello, Caroline.
Hello, Vic. So as I said, Caroline Gorman. I basically run Rage Music. Rage Music is a music production company, so we make music for films, TV titles, soundtracks, adverts, radio adverts, and we work with some bands and artists as well. We've got a studio over in Glasgow, which is our main head office. We've got one in London, and we just opened up one in LA last year. My team are kind of 5 composers/producers who all have their own specific style or genre that they're especially good at, and my job is to manage them. Yeah.
Let's hear it for Caroline. Come on. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Very nice, thank you. Also on my right, Eleanor Yule, who is a film director, so knows a lot, obviously, about placing music in films. Eleanor, please tell us a little bit about what you do, what you've done, and what you're planning to do.
Yeah, thanks. As he says, I work in film. I'm a filmmaker and screenwriter, but I have a background also at the BBC as a documentary maker. So I've both placed music in documentaries, but I've also had the privilege of working with composers. And I've worked with people like Jeffrey Bergen, who did Brideshead Revisited. He's more kind of classical composer. The band St Etienne, they scored one of my short films. Also, Paul Leonard Morgan, who is with Caroline, and the lovely Malcolm Lindsay. He actually scored the feature film I made, which is called Blinded, with starred Peter Mullen and Jodie May. So I've had a great experience working with composers and musicians. So I'm very positive about the whole thing.
Let's hear it for Eleanor, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. To my immediate left is Malcolm Lindsay, who's already had a little bit of an introduction already. He's a composer for film and TV and so on. Malcolm, tell us a little bit about what you've done.
Well, I worked mainly in the last couple of years for television, but over the last 10 years for television and film and various other projects, and to make my living through writing music for TV. In the last year, I've done 15 hours of primetime telly, which was perhaps just a little bit too much, but really enjoyed it nonetheless. Right now, most of my work comes from or through my agent in London, so it's connected with one of the London-based TV companies or channels. But last year I had the privilege of working in Scotland for the first time. I'm based in Glasgow, first time in ages, and did a bit of Taggart, so I felt like I was paying my dues in all sorts of different ways. It was great fun to do. And the other 2 things that I did two things I did last year were Civilization, which is still running on Sunday nights on Channel 4, and Whitechapel, which ran earlier last year. Previous series include Unforgiven, one called The Children, Mountain for BBC, and a few others. So quite a variety. That'll do, I think.
I think that will do. Malcolm. And finally, on my far left, Hugh Williams, who's involved with the Soundtrack Film Festival. Hugh, tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, I've been in the music business in various forms for about 100 years, I think. And I started as an artist. I was the singer in an indie pop group called the Pooh Sticks as a young man. And then I went into band management. I also worked for Sony ATV Music Publishing as an A&R guy, and then had my own independent publishing company funded by Sony called Townhill Music, which is when I started doing sort of telly and some film supervision. In recent times, I set up a film festival in Cardiff about 3 years ago, we've done 2 of them so far, called Soundtrack, which I actually co-curated with a guy from Edinburgh called Mark Cousins in the first year as well. So that's me. Let's
hear it for Hugh as well. Thank you very much. I just realised I didn't recognise you initially. I saw the Pooh Sticks back in the day, so it was great fun.
My glasses back on.
I'll have to have a chat with you after about that. Anyway, as I say, if there's anything that you want to ask that I'm not asking, that our panellists aren't talking about, please store it up and get ready. Towards the end, I'll throw it over to you. Don't be shy, put your hands up, and it'll all be lovely jubbly. Right, first and foremost, very simply, I'll go to you first, Eleanor. How does music get chosen for a film?
Well, there's 2 different kind of routes you can go down depending on your budget. For a film director, for somebody like me who I see myself as an artist, as I would see musicians and bands, etc., as artists, the best way for me is to basically get a composer to do the entire soundtrack. Because it means that they're responding artistically to what I've done. So generally speaking, we cut the film and then we hand it over to a composer. We talk to the composer about what we're trying to do. The composer can help you a lot. They can get you out of jail if you've screwed up emotionally at certain points. They can emphasize this for you. They can sort a lot of the stuff out in post-production that maybe, you haven't actually managed to get on location. You've got to find a language. You've got to find a way of speaking to each other, because I'm not a musician and they're not a filmmaker. So how do you talk to each other? That's something maybe we'll pick up later, because I think that's a very important thing for all you guys out there to know. What kind of language are you going to talk to somebody like me? If you start talking to me about, with musical kind of terms, all that kind of thing, it's not really going to register completely. So we've got to kind of meet in the middle and find a language that's common.
Well, just give an example of that. I mean, would you sort of say to the composer, I want this to be spiky and purple and kind of sad. And they go, right.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It can be a bit cheesy until you can find something that both of you kind of get. So different people have different understanding. I mean, for me, obviously, the whole thing comes from the narrative and the script and the character arcs and the emotional journeys. That's what I'm interested in. So I might sit down and explain to the composer what I'm trying to do where the peaks of emotion are. And also, say, for instance, if I'm doing a thriller, where I want to maybe send out a red herring, so that I would say to the composer, I really want them to think that this person's done it, so I want you to put something into the score. So I tend to talk like that, but I know a lot of directors do tend to say, I want it red hot or purple, or I want it an oblong or a square or whatever. But it's obviously up to the 2 people in the relationship to find a language that suits them both. But the other way, when I did documentaries and we didn't really have a budget to get a composer, and when I say a composer, it could also be a band like St. Etienne that came on board and scored the whole film, is that we would then place music. So you would basically be allowed, and I always used to go, generally speaking, to film music because it was kind of more ambient, so you could kind of manipulate it and place it. It wasn't too structured, it was easy to kind of shape. But I always thought that was kind of second best to actually being able to actually really work with musicians who could give you really interesting ideas.
Well, let's point the next question at you, Malcolm. Obviously, you would be in a kind of artistic relationship with a director, how closely does the composer and the director or the editor or the person with the artistic vision for the film or TV program, how closely do you work with them?
It varies between projects. So, for instance, in one case that I can think of, the director has a fantastic vision of the kind of television that he's trying to create. So he knows before he starts shooting the kind of music that he wants, or he'll at least have mapped out the sections in the film where he wants the music. So he's very prescriptive in he knows exactly here and here. And in this particular case, working with this chap, I'll be giving him some music, sometimes before the film's shot, but usually as it's being shot. So whenever there's an assembly made, the executive people who are kind of in control of the film will be hearing my music on it first, not a temporary music score by Zimmerman or some other composer. So I think that's quite interesting. So there's a whole kind of journey there. Also with this particular guy, I'll fire 3 versions of the start of the film, and he'll say, Malcolm, they're all rubbish, but see the third one, that will be the beginning of Act 3 of this film for sure. It just fits perfectly. So he's got a great vision, and he's got a really good musical brain, and that's fine. So that's another example. Is I'm doing a television program for quite an established film character, and the director visits my studio and signs off on the score, having heard it once, which is fair enough. Some people can do that. And then 3, 4, 5 weeks later, I get a phone call from the dub from London, where they're putting it all together, say, Malcolm, it's blah here. The ending of the film doesn't work. So those are 2 quite distinct and real...
so the ending of the film doesn't work. What does that mean? You have to take that piece of music and put a big triumphant end section to the song?
Hey, Malcolm, you screwed up. Even although, they had the chance to review and say, that ending is working really well. So it's just to let you know how the 2 different relationships can work. One is full on, you're talking to somebody every day in your sleep, on email, all the rest of it. And the other, you might have 5 conversations with them for the same duration of television or piece that you're working on. So it does vary. Okay. The relationships vary.
Can I just get a show of hands? Who's a musician in here, please? All right, most of you. Has anyone... or is anyone composing for TV or film or hoping to? Less of you.
Kill them.
We'll talk about placing your tracks in a film or a TV program in a bit, but I think these are kind of wise words about composing 2 pictures.